Okay. Thank you. Okay. So I want to welcome everybody for joining us today. And thank you to so many of you who have submitted questions. I've tried to incorporate them into today's discussion. I'm Cynthia Stremba, the Director of Volunteers and State and Local Advocacy with Parents Against Vaping. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to type them into the Q&A and we'll try to get to as many as possible. So, Kyle, Bria, Victoria, and Blake, we're so happy to have you here. As a note, you're all from Westminster High School outside of Denver.
Yep.
Okay. So, Kyle, I want to start with you. You're a visual arts teacher, and until recently, you were a track coach. Would you set the stage for us? Your school practices suspension if a student is caught vaping or possessing a vape. Yet you were able to create a safe space for your students to talk honestly about their substance use. How did it come to be that the administration gave you this leeway to work with the students?
Thank you, Pay, for having us here today. Cynthia, Austin, and Mimi, everyone for having us here today is pretty awesome. There are quite a few Genesis stories as to how we got here today at this moment, that the more I keep looking back on my career of 21 years teaching and 22 years of being a track coach, of how did we end up here? It's kind of unique that there was just like one little snowball that got bigger and bigger and bigger to this point where I think it all boils down to my own personal rock bottom that I hit almost 9 years ago on November 2nd of 2015, dealing with alcoholism and coming to grips with that and owning that and building my foundation back up again off of that rock solid foundation, which was not easy to do initially, but I've always been a really personable, I feel empathetic teacher, that I don't just stay within the confines of my subject matter, that I try to relate to kids as much as possible any way I can, because I know they have to go out and become citizens eventually. So when that happened, I ended up using it and owning it in front of my students and bringing that into the classroom, just letting them be aware of the dangers of alcohol and addiction. And then fast forward a couple of years, you see those big mods coming out, those massive suckers that look like cell phone bricks that kids were vaping and using, and I kind of knew about it. And then I would use the restroom and I noticed like these little tiny, looked like USB chips in the bathroom. Like, what is that? And at the time, my oldest son was a senior in high school. He kept talking about this Juul thing. Like, what Juul? What are you talking about? And then I just learned that, well, it's this device that's synthetically getting into kids' bodies with all this nic, and it became really addictive. So I ended up using my own story to talk to the students about addiction, how dangerous I feel that these devices are, becoming a guest speaker for myself in my classroom. You mentioned the leeway of the staff or my administration. I never really asked permission to do anything. I just started doing it in the classroom in terms of wanting to relate and connect to them and help them as much as I could. When I became a guest speaker for myself on those sobriety dates, and I would just challenge kids to go one day without vaping, or even better, have one kid turn in a vape. And when that one kid turned in a vape, it just became this like wildfire spread of perhaps something good, of this teacher is not going to get you in trouble. It's not going to be a punishment. It was not a trap. I think there was some hesitation and trepidation at first with kids hearing that I was doing this. And I started turning them into the dean's office. Like, I just got 4 vapes turned into me. And I think that they're kind of taken back. This is about 6 years ago, 5 years ago when this first happened. Like, what, how did you get those? And I just kept the students anonymous for the most part, because I didn't want to put up a wall or make them feel like, no, I was trapping them. I was not. I didn't mean to do that. That was never my intention. It still isn't today. So that's just kind of spread. And then through the help of when I reached out to Pay for the first time 2 years ago about now, when one of my parents said, you should contact Pay because they're doing something similar than you're doing. And that's just been this, again, massive avalanche of, it's opened up so many doors to me talking to people all over the nation. Shout out to Lonnie Collison in North Carolina. They were supposed to come today. She's part Department of Public Health, but they're dealing with the hurricane stuff too. I've just met so many people that we're all on the same team. We're all or another analogy is we're all in the same van going to the same destination. So it's just good to know that there's so many of us out there that I did not even know existed. So once administration saw of how well this was working, at least getting the conversation started, that's all I wanted to ever do, is meet kids where they're at, get the conversation started. And I think it's been wildly successful. Granted, the numbers may not be super good in terms of kids kicking this, because it just proves how difficult it is to quit, but there we go.
Right. Yeah. And from everything I have learned, administration has really embraced and supported you.
Yep.
So, we'd love to hear about, the activities and events that you've put into place to engage the students.
Sure. So it took me a while. I wanted to get a support club here at school about 4 years after my sobriety date. I could just feel that these kids were going through something and it was shifting. Like I feel personally, the kids are pretty open to me. Alcohol is not nearly a thing, nearly as much as the THC carts and vaping nowadays, because alcohol, they just get a hangover with it. They don't like it nearly as much. But for this thing, it's convenient. It's easy to hide and conceal, and you can do it at school pretty easily. So I felt like there's a need for a club, kind of like an AA club, where kids, it's a safe space after school to come into. And I called it the Phoenix, just because if you got suspended, if you got caught, if you got burnt out, a Phoenix, when they die, they rise again through their own ashes. So it's called the Phoenix. We meet on Tuesdays after school, but it's not set at that time. Like I have kids coming in all the time to my room just to talk, or like, are you that teacher that talks to kids about stuff? So yes, there is that group, and I'm really thankful that the school let me do that thing before we even got to kids making art. So I was getting all these vapes coming in, especially after that sobriety date in 2021, where one got turned in. I had 20 within the first week of kids wanting to stop. They wanted to stop. It wasn't me, I don't know, threatening. Is just me being more loving and supportive. I'm not trained in any capacity or in any way other than just trying to be really empathetic for kids, especially when they know that they've been hooked and deceived, and now they can't get off this ride, this roller coaster. So I thought, well, what are we supposed to do with these things? Because I didn't know about, another shout out to Vape Aware in Boulder, Colorado, that takes care of all of our vapes, what we're supposed to do with them. And I had a student, the one that turned in the very first one, that I've been working with in the capacity as a mentor for the last 2 years. I had her start making a plastic cast of a mannequin, and she just started filling the vapes that were coming in inside this mannequin. And that's going to be over my shoulder at some point on the screen that's going in the background. That piece won a gold medal for scholastics at the national level. That brought up a lot of attention of us turning I use the phrase turning a poison into a passion, creating a conversation piece, because that's exactly what it does. Is where'd you get all those? How are those coming into you? And I'm grateful for that student that was willing to kind of put herself out there in that regard. So when I do teach art, so when we have products, I teach a photography class. I am not forcing them to make these products about vaping. I do like them to tell stories. And again, I feel like stories educate better than anything. And some of them do. And there's no gotcha, there's no catch, that if they want to use this addiction, I feel like that's the right word, to express and relate to other people. Like Bria has an absolutely gorgeous piece that she took last year. It's going to be over the screen too. She has a hand on a vape, and then there's this skeleton hand coming forward. It's absolutely gorgeous, and that just resonates with kids as they walk by and they see this thing. I never told her to do that. She just did that. So art was one way, and then the biggest thing has been the 424s program that, after Pave recommended me for the New York Times article, I was getting a lot of emails from various people all over the nation about what we're doing. And I thought, well, it's the year 2024 coming up. There's 24 hours in a day. There's got to be something with that. And I thought April 24th, 4/24, can kids go 24 hours, 24 days, 24 weeks, and then the rest of 2024 sober? 2024 is ending, but 4/24s is not going to end. So it's going to be 24/7. That can kids go 24/7 without whatever it is? And that just blew up. with the help of people like Michael De Leon from Steered Straight, with Pave, I reached out to the famous YouTuber Adrian Harding, who he actually flew in, and it was like a concert here at our school. To this day, we've had over 500 vapes turned in, over 350 were turned in on that day alone, due to some incentives that I had for kids. We have bracelets for if they make certain milestones, white bracelet for 24 hours, purple for 24 days. Red is 24 weeks, and that's actually coming up on 10/24. So when we come back to school after our fall break, Blake and I are going to be heading up a big "How are you doing?" Actually, all three of these kids are involved with 4/24. So that has got some serious traction, and I'm very excited to combat 420, which is notorious for weed, with 4/24s. And can kids go just 24 hours? And it doesn't need to start on April 24th. Anybody can do this at any moment. We had some local groups help out, like Chick-fil-A, Renegade Burrito. City of Westminster donated rec center passes that if kids turned in vapes or if they started conversations, they got these incentives. And we had a lot of fun that day. It was a lot of stress. It was a lot of work for all of us to make it happen. And I look forward to doing that again. So
Yeah, I'm hoping we'll have enough time to get back and hear from Bria, Victoria, and Blake about their participation. But right now, I just want to say to all of you students that this is a really important conversation, and I want to stress that we appreciate your willingness to share your experiences with vaping, and we don't want you to feel any pressure to reveal anything that you're not comfortable with. The sole purpose of this conversation is to provide perspective to others who are trying to help others, students like yourselves. Would each of you give a brief history of your experience with vaping? When did you start? Are you still vaping? Bria, let's start with you.
Okay, I started vaping about 5th grade, and I'm a junior in high school now, so I've been doing it for a while now. It was consistent up until my freshman year of high school, which is when I met Mr. Wimmer. And ever since then, it's been like on and off. But during 4/24s, I think I stopped vaping for about 2 weeks. And then something ended up happening. I just went back into it. But currently now I'm not vaping. I don't remember the last time I vaped. So I haven't.
Great. That's wonderful.
Thank you.
wow, my goodness.
And it's very challenging. So
Yes.
we all understand that. Victoria?
So I started smoking weed before I started vaping. But I was walking home one day with a friend and he was like, "Oh, you smoke, hit this." And I was like, "I don't know what that is. That's weird. It's huge and it's orange. Like, I don't want that." But he was like, "No, like if you smoke, you could hit it." And so I was like, okay, I took a hit out of it. And then I went home and I was so sick. I threw up. I was like, I was sweating and my head was pounding. And then the next day I was like, "Hey, do you still have that one thing that you let me hit yesterday that
No way.
sucked? Let me try it again." And so that was 8th grade. And I've been doing it very consistently since then. Like I've had my own until just one day. Like I didn't know Mr. Wimmer. I knew him through other people. And then one day I was like, "Wait, no, you're right. Like I don't think I like this." And so I turned in everything to him. And I went a while. I went a good, what was it, 5 weeks?
Yeah.
And then over the summer, I was hanging out with some friends and I forgot that I wasn't smoking anymore. And so I hit it and then I was like, "Oh my God. Oh my gosh, like I'm not supposed to be doing that." And I went home and I cried. And I still haven't been able to get myself to stop like I did again, which sucks. But speaking like this is definitely like it encourages me to do better because I don't want anybody else to be doing this. So
Right. I mean, it's so awful that, you can have something that you that makes you feel so bad and
Mhm.
still have that rush that you want again.
Yeah.
Yeah, Blake?
Um, so I started vaping in 8th grade. It was just like something very common at my middle school. I wanted to like be like everybody else, so I tried it and then I got hooked onto it. And it was a consistent addiction all the way up until February of my freshman year, where I hit a severe rock bottom at our winter formal, which just happened to be 2 weeks before track season started. And I remember coming back to the school for the first time after that incident and asking to talk to both Miss and Mr. Wimmer, since Miss Wimmer was my business teacher and I heard Mr. Wimmer had experience with helping students like this. So Mr. Wimmer really helped me climb out of that rock bottom and not just get hooked onto it again, but like completely see it in a different light, especially with track. Track helped so much, and I no longer felt the need to do it when I had something like track, which I was so passionate about.
Well, that's quite a statement. But, also that you recognized, that it was impacting you like that. So, if you don't mind, let's paint a little bit more of a picture. What have you found appealing about vaping? What would you say played the biggest role in your starting and then continuing?
I think one of the biggest things was definitely the flavors. I think that was what caught my attention at first. Like there was strawberry flavors, cotton candy flavors, like all sorts of stuff like that. I was like, oh, that sounds,
Effing fat.
yeah. And I think also after like I got to like vape more, I think it was the like buzz feeling, like the effect that it brought just for like those first couple of seconds. I think that those both played very big roles in like the attraction towards them.
Definitely the flavors, but I would also have to say the community that we build around it, like going into the bathroom, being like, oh, hey girl, what's that flavor? Here, you want to switch? And just switching and talking. And I've made so many friends because of that. Like that's why I have my current group of friends, but then we found Mr. Wimmer and it's completely different now. But just the community and like the rush of like sitting in the back of a class and like having it in your sleeve and like secretly hitting it, just stuff like that. Yeah.
Okay,
Does
do
it,
you-
does it help like when you're having bad days or good days?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
how? Like, what would you say? So what are you feeling before you take that hit?
It's like gaslighting yourself into thinking that like it's a medicine that's gonna cure what you have for that moment. And it does. Like you think about it, like you hit it and it's like, oh, okay, everything's okay. Oh wait, let me hit it again because maybe it needs to be more okay. Oh, let me do it again. Maybe just one more time. It's just like the constant of it.
Right. Did you, any of you, sorry, Blake, I don't mean to
You're good.
say
Okay.
this before you give your thing, but do you feel like maybe, what did you feel? Have you had anxious feelings or feeling down, or did any of those lead to your vaping?
I mean, maybe like if there was a while where you'd go without it, definitely you'd feel anxious, probably going a while without it. Oh.
And
Oh.
Blake?
I feel like the biggest thing for me was like before I knew how wrong it was to do it, was just like when I would get bored, especially like I feel being bored is such a huge thing when you're addicted to like nicotine, because you could just vape.
Yep.
And like you watch the smoke and you do the tricks and like being bored for sure. And then also just feeling anxious, like especially when I would get anxious in class, I would just, hey, can I use the restroom? And I would just go sit in there for a couple of minutes vaping, and I would feel more open and okay to going back to class.
Huh. We
But-
hear a lot about boredom
Yeah,
acting.
I was just gonna say that same thing. That word boredom comes up more than any other word. It's not necessarily stress or anxiety. It's they're just bored, and that's the only thing that the brain is being rewired to thinking that this is gonna fix my boredom.
Huh. So do you think in any way that, how shall I put this? Is if, do you feel like you've learned to be bored in life and accept it? Or do you feel that you're really not, you hear about kids being so scheduled today. So could it be that you just don't know how to be bored or can't accept that?
Well, part of me thinks like back to my experience with track, like I just wasn't doing anything that I was passionate about. Like Mr. Wimmer said, he traded the poison for a passion, and that's kind of how he has like, that's kind of his mission statement when he's talking to the kids. Like, I mean, kids are using art, or they're going into the 424 campaign and like seeing what they can do to help. So it's just like, instead of doing things that we're passionate about, like sports or like doing clubs or going to church and stuff like that, we just kind of sit here and we get bored, and that's how we get hooked into vaping. Like if we look into the communities of like who is vaping and who's not, it's the people that aren't doing anything that are
Huh.
vaping.
Okay, you all agree with that? I see everybody shaking their heads, yeah.
I definitely realized that I gave up a lot of the stuff that I was passionate about so I could have more time to vape. And then I was like, oh, like what happened to all the stuff that I used to do? I purposely got rid of them. Like I stopped doing it. And yeah,
Oh, but that's so interesting, Victoria, because you were passionate about things, you started to vape, and you lost your passion.
yeah,
And so
Yep.
that's kind of a vicious cycle there.
absolutely it is. Yeah.
Huh.
It's like instant gratitude or like gratification versus like long-term reward.
It's like, yeah, synthetic happy button that there's no push and desire and grit to get to the
Yeah.
happiness. You can just take this
Exactly.
device and become instantly happier, make your mood better in some capacity. And that's the dependence thing that I think that rewires a reward pathway so much that Nick kicks out everything that used to make them happy. And it says that I'm the only thing that's going to make you happy. So telling kids that that's been my number one thing I've been doing lately is they've been teaching me this is hard. It is the hardest thing they're going to do ever to try to quit this. And that's why I try to be as supportive as possible, because their brains have been chemically rewired to think that this one thing is the only thing that's going to make them not bored. It's going to make them happy. It's going to help them in their stressful situations. And I liken it to that biodome reference of when trees grow in biodomes, they fall over because they have not learned resilience with the wind pushing back and forth. And then the moment anything comes, poof, they're done. So yeah, that's the hardest part, is to make sobriety look cool and to know that it's worth it, because you're going up against this thing in this business that have so many new flavors coming out, and they taste amazing. They make you feel good, and they got little pulse modes on them so you can get 3 times as much. And here I am with some of my kids, like, it's not worth it, but it's so hard. They have to find out for themselves.
That's a really good analogy, the bioderm
Yeah.
dome analogy. I really like that. Kyle, you're in a position where students come to you for help and support. What happens when, for instance, the administration sends a student to you, or you sense a student is having issues but has not come to you and maybe is just not interested in hearing what you have to say? How do you handle that?
Mainly just through kind of testing the room. I feel like I'm a pretty good judge of character or of the human or the soul rather quickly. And if they've been brought to me, which has happened numerous times, which I thought is like a big, like, we like what you're doing thing. I've had admin bring me kids a lot over the last 2 years. There's a bell going on, sorry.
We
You're
can't
passing
hear
through.
it.
Okay, good. So if a kid comes to me with an admin, usually it's not the best situation. So they already have a little bit of a wall put up. So I don't do a quick introduction there. I kind of let them be, so it's nice to meet you. But I do find out their schedule, and I'll make it a point to go find them or pull them out of class really quick and just see where they're at. And I have yet to meet someone that initially might have been like trapped in a corner and being really aggressive. I just wait. And so far, all of them have come around. They'll either like send me an email, or they'll come by the room, or I can tell they'll stand by the door, and I can just sense that they want to come in, which takes a lot of guts to walk into my classroom full of kids. And usually most kids are not dumb. They know why they're in there. They know why they want to talk to me. They'll wait till the end, or sometimes they'll just come in. And it's, in terms of kids not willing to or not wanting to talk, again, it's just patience on my part, and I meet them where they're at. I am very open about that, as long as they're open with me. If I get to that point where we're comfortable enough to talk about their usage and what they're doing and how much, and what I feel works is just the students around that have seen that this is not a trap, that it's more about them and that they're worth it. So I feel like that's one of my strengths, is just the patience. Do I want them to stop right away? Yes. Do I want to like help them immediately and say you're just fixed with a one big quick hug and they're done? But I know that it is a process, and nobody is going to be the same. Like Blake and I, we both kind of glommed on to track, and now he's moved on to volleyball, and we know that that's not a performance enhancing anything. So with other kids, I try to find out what they're interested in and work in that regard. But at this moment, I've had numerous kids come to me from admin that I could feel initially were caught and they're upset, but when I let it sit for a couple of days and cool down, that's when I'll either follow up. And that's why we want to do the follow-up for 1024s too, is just see how kids are doing, not to trap them, not to guilt them, not to pressure them, not to make them feel like crap, because when kids slip, and they slip, that's the hardest thing for them to come up and say. And I never try to make them feel crappy about that. So I don't know if I answered that well enough, but that's kind of.
Yeah, you did. I imagine I was going to say to you, what do you find most challenging? What have you found most challenging? But I think you answered that too. Probably the patience,
Sure, yeah.
waiting,
Yeah, if other external challenging factors are just the facts that it's high school, and although they can't see it, it is a blip on their pie chart of life. Like I'm 44, so that was 4 years of my life. That was less than a tenth of my life now. I don't really remember a lot of it, but I know that my choices made during then have brought me to where I am right now. And at this moment in their life, it is their life, because they have responsibilities, they have jobs, they have school, they have all this stuff going on, and it's social. Like nothing the world's ever seen before, that social aspect. And it's so hard for them to tell their friends, hey, I'm done with this thing. I need you to support me, because if they say that, their friends might internalize, well, if you have a problem, I have a problem, and they don't want that. That friend doesn't want that. They're going to try to reel them back in, because misery loves company, and oh, you're fine, you don't need that thing. So the amount of grit and determination and perseverance that these kids have to tell their friends, look, I'm done, I can't imagine. Plus the fact that Big Vape has all of these new flavors, all these copycats constantly being input. Like for us in Colorado, I don't think I'm wrong in saying this, a Geek Bar is the #1. It used to be Lost Mary. Well, it used to be Esco, then Lost Mary, and then Geek Bar is just taken over. Now I've noticed Click something is pretty big. But they're just these kids are just constantly being preyed upon
right.
by these companies by coming up with something new. So that is a challenge that I really don't have anything other than compassion. And I've mentioned this numerous times before for anyone that's seen speak, that I just feel like I am that little tiny guy in Mario Kart, that when you fall off the map with your go-karts, there's this little cloud guy at the hook that comes and picks you up and puts you back on the track and scoots you along. No matter how many times you fall off, that's that thing's purpose. So that's what I try to do here in high school in that short amount of time, or 4 years for them.
Another wonderful analogy. I love that. Okay. So I'm going to say that so many of the questions that came in during registration had to do with quitting. So let's talk about that, quitting or attempting to quit. All of you have tried to quit, students. What made you decide it was time? Now, Blake, you, for instance, you're an athlete. Did that play into your quitting story?
Yeah, 100%. I'll continue saying it, like I traded vaping for track. Like I could not have both. They're very contradicting
Hmm.
towards each other. So I chose track in the long run, and then that became volleyball, of course. But I think Mr. Wimmer just helped me see it in a new light. Like I can't vape anymore without finding it disgusting or finding myself guilty. And like vaping now sends me into like panic attack spirals because of how disgusting and how guilty I feel after I do it. So I just see it in a new light, and that's what helped me quit.
Which I think is pretty rare. That Blake is I feel like he and I have a lot in common with my own struggle, that I knew I was done. And a lot of people didn't think I was done drinking, but I knew I was done. And I used other people's doubt as more fire and passion for me. So in terms of quitting stories and successes, he is a one-off, unfortunately, that he had the mental aptitude to go, no, this is not going to be good for me, because not a lot of people have that. And it's crazy difficult. So because I know that there are plenty of athletes, another person that's supposed to be here today, a student named CJ with baseball, all sports have vaping in them in some capacity, but very few who want to be really good at their sport know they can't do both. So sorry to interject, but that's thought that was a good
Yeah,
analogy you did.
we appreciate the reference of yet of another student. Bria, quitting.
I would just say Mr. Wimmer was my biggest help with quitting. I think that like the more I got to know him and the more that I heard him out, I just realized it wasn't cool and it was gross and it wasn't healthy for me. And so I think that Mr. Wimmer was just the biggest help in that. So, I mean, obviously I did do sports while I was vaping, and that was also very hard too. I also knew that I couldn't really do both. That wasn't necessarily why I quit doing sports, but I knew that there was like a boundary there, if that makes sense.
Sure.
I think you need to give yourself some credit too. Like I can't make all of them stop. I wish I could, I can't, but it does come back. So I feel like Bria is selling herself short a little bit. If you don't mind, I will say that Bria and I have gotten close over the last 2 years, that she's been pretty open since day one at me, like talking about in class. You can always tell if somebody is because there's shifty eyes back and forth when I start talking about in the classroom, of talking about this thing that teachers aren't like taboo, not supposed to talk about. But I call out the fact that some of them have them in their pockets right now. And Bria was kind of unique because she helped another friend like muster up the courage to come talk to me. And then I think that like opened the door for Bria to start talking about it more. And just showing you how difficult it is. Are you okay with like me guessing how many times you think you've tried to quit? I would say Bria's tried to quit at least 10 times over the last 2 years.
Yeah.
One of them was, are you okay with this? One of them was so severe that she got caught in the bathroom, and she came back and was just so upset and just was done. Like, this is it. I'm done. I'm never doing it again. And then that's always difficult because I never want to be like constantly asking, how you doing? How you doing? How you doing? Because I don't want to be
Right.
annoying, but I want to be this balance of supportive. And then when I asked her about 2 weeks later how she's doing, she's got this little sly smile at the side of her, and she does this little shrug like, well, okay. So that was me, like her way of kind of knowing or telling me that it was not as easy as she thought, that in the immediacy of being a prisoner of the moment of being caught, it was so sad for me. And I get really emotional. So I cried, she's crying about how like we did not have to get to this point, but this was it for her. But that persistence of the Nick knocking at the door is nonstop.
Well,
So
we'll talk more about that in just a second. Let's hear from Victoria.
Oh, so like I said earlier, like I knew Mr. Wimmer. I didn't really know Mr. Wimmer. I didn't really know what he was doing. I heard his 424 spiel and I was like, yeah, whatever, that has nothing to do with me. Like I'm not at that point. He's good. He's doing his thing. I'm doing mine. And me and my group of friends, we would he's the best. I need to say that he's like literally the best. We would sit in this room, there's a hallway right here, it goes to the other room. We would sit in that corner and we would vape in there. He knew. It was 4 of us. And then just, I don't know, like I heard more and more about him talking to other students. 2 of my friends also tried to quit in that span, like they would give up their vapes. And then I just kind of realized that I was like hiding out in the bathroom a lot because like everywhere, at my job, at home, here, when I go to the store, just because like I can't vape in public. I'm underage and I'm with my parents, like, so it would have to be a secretive thing, and I would do that a lot. And so it kind of just hit me. I was like, that's kind of embarrassing. And like, it's weird that I'm always in the bathroom and I'm like, oh, my stomach hurts. I'm having stomach problems like every single day.
Right,
So,
right.
Right before 424s, we still weren't close. I came up to him with my makeup bag and I was like, here, take it. I want these out of my life. I'm done. And we've just been working from there, doing stuff like this, which has helped so
So-
much.
So would you say, and Bria, please feel free to step in here too, and Blake, would you say that because of the programs that are in place, it gave you the latitude to even get to that point of feeling the disgust or wanting to, something different for yourselves?
Definitely. In our peer group settings, that we don't talk about how much nicotine will affect our brains. We just talk about what flavor is that? What brand is that? And so him giving us that different perspective of like, this is what it does. This is what it's going to do. This is how it's affecting you. It definitely like puts it into perspective and like completely different way of thinking.
And it's like such an awkward conversation that needs to be had.
Yeah.
Like there's so many teachers across the state, the nation that knows certain students are like vaping, but just won't have the conversation. And Mr. Wimmer will. He will call you out. He will tell you what's going on, what's going to happen, and that's the conversation that needs to be had. I think that's the biggest thing when it comes down to everything Mr. Wimmer does.
Wonderful. I mean, clearly the support factor there is making a big impact. And I'm wondering if we all know how difficult it can be to quit. You're talking about that. So there must have been times when you struggled not to vape, when you were trying to stop, but you struggled to keep there. What was that like? Did you have cravings? How did you handle that?
Well, the hardest part about quitting, I'd say, is definitely your friends. If your friends vape, that's one of the hardest things ever. I think I was quitting, I know I was sober for a couple of days and my friend had a vape and I was doing completely fine without vaping. I wasn't craving it. I wasn't anything like that. And then as soon as I saw them pull out their vape, I was craving it. I wanted it, like, and so I think that's definitely one of the hardest things. But obviously, I think when I was more consistent with it and I'd try to quit, it was definitely harder. I'd crave it more. But now that I've gone a lot longer without it, I think I don't crave it as much as I used to. But there were definitely moments where I did crave it.
We hear sometimes that, people do, try to kind of trick, the 3 minutes when you're having a craving, what do you do to deal? How do you deal with it? Some kids will do jumping jacks. I don't know if any of it works, but jumping jacks, yo-yo, various other things. Like, was there something that any of you used?
Well, Mr. Wimmer also did have candy and like suckers and gum for us during class. So when I was trying to quit and I'd crave it during class periods, he would have candy that we could use. And I think that definitely helped a lot. Cause like with the flavors and stuff, they kind of went together.
Victoria, thank you, Bria. Victoria and Blake, is there anything you would add to all of that?
Oh, yeah. Well, like she said, like Okay, specific gum, like the very, very fruity flavored gum, because it's very similar to fruity flavored vapes. He also got like the flavored toothpicks, and I found those were super helpful, because like I would just sit there and I'd chew on it, and then it would break and I'd grab another one and chew on it. Also, I found this out, it's weird and it only works for me, nobody else likes this, but I'm just very outgoing. When I would really start craving, I would stand up and I would sing a song. And towards the end, yeah,
Wow,
that
Interesting.
helped, because it
Okay.
made my brain think of something else.
I'll do it.
Very smart. Huh. Okay. Do you have a good voice?
No, which made it better because people would look at me. Oh, weird.
I thought maybe just love to sing and whatever. Blake, how about you?
I feel like since I never had Mr. Wimmer as a teacher, like I would never come into his class and grab a candy. I feel that I would just be awkward and I would not put myself in that situation. So I would just walk around until I found someone to talk to. Like, especially last year, like if I was craving it in my 7th hour class, I would just go and talk to them. And like I would never bring up vaping or anything like that. I would just go find someone to talk to, because I knew the like pressure and like the tension would be lifted if I wasn't alone. If that makes sense. Like I just find somebody to talk to, or I get up from my bed and go talk to my mom or something like that.
Well, that brings up another question, which is, do you talk amongst yourselves about your struggles when you're not in, Kyle's club or whatever?
I mean, I wouldn't say we talk about it that much, but I know me and Blake definitely have brought it up every once in a while. It's not something that we talk about all the time, but we've definitely talked about it before.
Yeah, I think I think it usually just starts with, I need to stop,
Yeah.
or we need to stop, or you need to stop.
Yeah.
Like that's how it's always
And-
starts, and then it's always like, but like this, or like I can't right now,
Yeah,
until we like got into a mindset where it's like we kind of have to.
yeah, I know we've definitely both asked each other, like, how are you doing with that? Like, stuff like that.
Okay. Did any of you try like patches or the gums or
What about Zins? You
Yes.
guys tried
I-
Zins?
Nope, tried all.
Those
Tried
sound
Zins?
so
I
scary
tried-
to me.
Zins were not good, like any of like the nicotine mouth pouches, no. Nicotine gum, I don't, and patches, I feel like it's almost just as bad as vaping. You're still getting that nicotine, and then like I realized that after the flavor or like the nicotine in the gum would leave, I would like pop in another one. And I was like, oh wait, I'm doing the exact same thing.
Interesting. You did
Yeah.
the patches?
I did for like a day.
Okay.
And I cried because it like too much.
Mm.
It was too much.
so I'll address this to you, Kyle. We talked about the Jolly Ranchers. Clearly that has an impact. Are there any other kind of resources that you find helpful? Wait, what did you just pick up?
This is the thing that they're talking about. So in my back little hallway room, I've got lots of Jolly Ranchers and then flavored gum. Those flavored toothpicks, which are crazy, crazy, crazy powerful. They're very minty or cinnamon, like Victoria likes the most. Other things, I have probably like 24 books, like Zen Doodle books, Zen Tangle books that are just designs that I bought a bunch of Sharpies, colored pencils that kids just go back there and just draw and use that as like a weird way, but I guess it's true, like meditation, just focusing on one specific task of watching something get more beautiful the more you put time into it. That actually took off a lot last year. I was fairly surprised to see that many kids coming in just wanting to do that. Whether or not they're actually using it as a cessation device, it was effective because it's just kids doing something positive for an hour or however long, and sometimes not going to their other classes after that to finish up their drawing. I have QR codes with a bunch of resources, but is podcasts work really well? There's a podcast by Emma Chamberlain, who's a very famous YouTuber and podcaster, and she was really open about her own vaping problem back in June of last year, how bad she wanted to quit. So I had kids listen to that. And then in November, she followed up again saying it's not going well. Like, this is really hard. Short little videos, because kids don't like to read a lot. And especially if you offer something like, you should watch this, there's always a little bit of like, I don't know if I want to. They kind of need to stumble onto it by themselves, which is why kind of TikTok scrolling works really well. Well, Victoria and Bria definitely have sent me stuff before of like, look at this. Have you seen this before? And it just makes me smack my head like, oh my gosh, that their scrolling has found other things out there that are coming in, but they also find stuff that's effective. Like the nuggets video. If you've seen the kiwi bird walking by a nugget, it's 5 minutes long. It makes me cry almost every single time. It's so sad, but those kind of visuals can help relate to kids about, this is what this thing is doing to you. It's making you so codependent that you only live for this one thing. And that the phrase of addiction is giving up everything for one thing and recovery is giving up one thing for everything doesn't make sense until they try to start fixing themselves. So books, there's a book called Victoria's Voice that Michael De Leon from Steered Straight and the Victoria's Voice Foundation sent us. They sent us 60 books. That's been really effective too. Now, granted, that's a little bit more extreme in terms of addiction of drugs, but I am shameless in trying to find as many things as possible. Like, I wish everybody would be into track, like you vape, let's go run, and they're instantly fixed, but that's not going to work. So we're just getting creative. And I think something like this, like talking around, like finding out that standing up and singing, that would most certainly, I think, discourage somebody from vaping, that's for sure. So lots of different things that are being added to the toolkit.
Okay, thank you so much. We have to go to Q&A, so we'll see what questions are there for you. How do you get to the students? How do you get the vapes?
How do I get them?
For the kids, for the students, where
Sure.
do you
There is, can you hold that up?
online,
So in my room, I have this massive bin, which it's right in the front of the room. But if a kid wants to drop off a vape, they can either hand it to me, but I have some kids who walk in and they just put it in there just like that. And right now there's 18 in there since the start of the school year. So that means we're on a pace of like 2 a week of kids walking in, dropping off a vape. And that's how they come into me.
okay, and then how do they get them? Like,
How do they get their vapes?
yeah, is there a
Oh.
dealer? Is there,
You
know,
guys go ahead. This is an interesting one.
It's
Plugs.
pretty easy, especially being in high school, like knowing a lot of older people that are able to get them. The way I got mine was, my friend, she was maybe like 17, and there was a vape shop that did an ID. They did an ID people, and she was able just to walk right in there and get them, and I just give her money and she'd get them for me.
Yeah. There's multiple places that I know don't ID that I would go to. I have a plug. I had a plug. I don't I'm not in contact with them anymore. But like, he would call me one of his regulars because he would be over at my house like once a week, dropping off another box of the ugliness.
This is like DoorDash for vapes.
Pretty much, yep.
Basically.
Like,
Yeah,
you
they
feed
send,
them.
you've seen his menu.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I think I've shared that with you before, Cynthia. It's a minute plus of
right?
thousands of options that this guy just drives around and delivers them to the
He
kids,
says, what do you want? You tell him what you want. You send him your address or wherever you want to meet.
which is scary.
And he just
It
goes.
is scary. Very, very. So what was it? Oh, I was going to ask a question here. Have any of you used the quit line? Any quit line to help you quit?
He is our quit line.
Okay, that's a really good answer.
I didn't know that it was. Is it like safe to tell? Or is it like?
Well, it's to assist you to, it's a text thing. It's to assist you
Yeah.
to give you support to quit.
I'd be open to it. like if I was still vaping, but yeah, I have not.
Okay. So,
One that real, I'm so sorry, one that Victoria used, I don't know if Bree and Blake did, but Vape Aware or Escape the Vape, there are different apps out there now. That Escape the Vape is very, very, very encouraging for the kids because it gives them how much money they've saved, what they've been doing with their body. And there's a lot of copycats out there, but Escape the Vape has been really effective for us, for them.
okay, thank you for that. So, you know, this is just going back to quitting again, that it's a really kind of a loaded subject, you know, really trying to get, you know, or everybody's trying to get their hands around it. So again, what is the one thing you've heard or read that had the most impact on your decision to quit?
Well, to be honest, Mr. Wimmer would show us like things, like, I don't know how to, he used to show us things to like, maybe like how many like hits of a vape would equal how many like packs of cigarettes.
Yeah.
And to be honest, that didn't do anything. I knew how bad it was. I heard how bad it was. It did not change my perspective on vaping. Obviously, I knew it was bad, but it didn't make me stop at all.
Right.
I think, I don't know where I heard it, but as soon as I found out that it was affecting my like dental health and hygiene, that's when I got scared. I was like, no, I'm done.
Mr. Wimmer told me that it makes you look older, and that freaked me out. I was like, oh my God, no.
Well, you know, that's so interesting. Well, you know, certainly that would be, you know, that would be an incentive. But you know, it's funny how, because you can't necessarily relate to the physical changes because you haven't really kind of experienced them, or you don't feel that you have. Uh, in some respects, but you know, dental health is something that is really hard to ignore and make the association with. So, you know, I could certainly understand that. What about social media? Talk about social media. TikTok. Does it make it harder? Is it triggering to see things?
I think I would think that it doesn't really do much. I mean, like for our generation, vaping, like if you don't vape, you're more weird than somebody that doesn't or
Hmm.
that does vape. So like to see it on social media is just the same as like knowing that however many kids are vaping at your school. So I don't
Right.
think it really affects or triggers us. I think it's more in person or like being around it that's triggering.
What about kids that do tricks? Does
I
tricks? Okay,
Just
go
want
ahead.
to say that, sorry. Seeing tricks, like people will have like the no airflow rooms and like do like really awesome tricks, and I'm like especially when I was quitting, I was like, oh my God, I could do that, and now I can't. Like that was so fun, and now I can't do it. Or like being in the bathroom with tricks too.
Hmm.
I mean, like guys, watch, look at what I taught myself, and then doing it, and then everybody's like, oh my gosh, like it's fun. It really is. It's horrible, but it's fun. But it's
Yeah,
in a sense.
right. You know, and put in the boredom factor in there.
Yeah.
Got everything you need. So uh, it, so, you know, would you talk a little bit more about the 424s from the student perspective? Like, what was it like being involved in that? Are you going to continue to be involved in it? What did you get out of it? And I will say, is it easier to do a 4s, 24s, and later, you know, you might have something to say about this, Kyle. Is it easier to do when you've already established the relationships? Or do you think that's a necessary part of it? Go ahead.
So I think, like speaking on the students' behalf, like we knew what we were walking into and we were like, oh, we'll help out, but we also had no idea. Like there was so much that happened that day that I was like, what? Like the whole, Adrian Harding thing, like nobody was expecting that. Nobody knew what he was gonna do or talk about or anything like that. So I feel like it was a little stressful in that way. But yeah, we all kind of knew what we were signing up for, but when it was actually happening, we were all kind of confused.
Yeah.
But I think it worked. Like, I know so many people that at least attempted to do 24 hours, whether they made it or not. It's the attempt that matters.
Right.
The conversation,
Yeah.
like the conversation was the school, and I thought that was amazing, because what other school does that, you know, like who actually has that conversation with the entirety of the school, that like the kids are sitting there being like, dang, maybe this is a problem. Oh, like they're quitting, they know that it's a problem, they have help, there's somebody to help them. It was good, and it definitely was very inspirational for a lot of people.
And I think to like add on to that, like it was live across the school, right? Like it was broadcasted, and we don't know what that looked like, what other students were experiencing. We just had like the in-person, we were on the stage with Daedrin and Mr. Wimmer and everybody. So maybe like this year or in further projects, maybe like try to see what other students are seeing from the outside when it's being broadcasted. But for the most part, for the in-person, like it was very interactive. People weren't on their phones. They were paying attention and actually listening to what needed to be said.
Huh. Okay. I have to ask a couple of quick questions because we're bearing down on the hour. The video that made you cry, what was the name of that, Kyle?
I believe it's just called Nuggets. It's a little kiwi bird. It's a cartoon
Oh.
bird, and it's this
Somebody
kiwi-
put that in the, put the link to it in the chat.
It is powerful. It is the best video I have ever seen in terms of what addiction feels like and what it does to you. And you become emotionally attached to this little tiny kiwi bird in the span of 5 minutes. And it's just heartbreaking. It is super well done. I encourage everybody to see this video. It's amazing.
Okay, and then is quitting very difficult, or is it the resisting the peer pressure that's the most difficult?
I'm trying to think.
That's a good
Kind of a loaded
question.
That is
question.
a good question. I feel like it's definitely addictive, but like once you find it disgusting, once you know that you don't want to do it anymore, you kind of lose sight of that addiction thing, and like you've already gone through the withdrawals and everything like that. So I think it might be the peer pressure. I think just being around it is scary, especially when you're just coming off.
Are they actually pressuring you though? Or are you
It's
just,
not like pressure, it's just
you're
like
just there?
I'm around it.
Okay.
It's just like awkward. You have a vape, you have a vape, you have a vape, and I'm just sitting here.
Yeah, I'm the only one not
And-
doing cool tricks or anything.
Yeah, then it just kind of, it sucks. It's like weird, and it's like, well, now I want to do it here, you know? Like, yeah.
Right. Okay, I would imagine, because, people say that you're trying to quit and then just simply being around a vape or hearing about it can trigger off those neurons. So it really makes everything, you have a hard, you're faced with a very difficult circumstance. With the addiction. So let's see, I think that we're about finished, but have you ever gone into classrooms of younger students to share your message?
I've been touring schools more and more within the last 2 years, where Victoria and I have been to a local high school. I'm going to be going up to a middle school in Summit County in November. I did a very small rural middle school and high school at Stratton, Colorado. So yeah, I've been going to smaller school or
Younger.
middle schools. I've not gone to elementary schools, but middle schools and high schools, because most kids are starting in 6th grade, 7th grade, as early as even 5th grade. So yeah, I think that's needed, but the hard part is it just looks so cool, and it's difficult to get these kids to not fall for that trap, because once they fall for it, they're set.
Right. For sure. And do you feel brave enough to talk to friends to stop, to tell them what you think. Like if you're with somebody, if you're in that environment where you're coming in and you're, you're saying, I want to stop. Is there like temptation there? Do the other students try to get you to vape? And how do you feel about just saying no? This is what happens.
I've definitely told my friends that I'm gonna quit. I don't know if it's really changed how they felt about it. Obviously, they still did it in front of me. Probably isn't the best. I have had a friend try to tempt me one time. I told them that I was sober for 2 weeks, and they tried to tempt me and tell me just to hit it. And I did say no, and I resisted it, so that was good.
Mhm.
Good
I
for you.
feel like a lot of the time, or like most of the time, I guess, when somebody offers you to hit their vape and you just say, oh, I've been sober, I quit, it's like they just take it back and they
Well,
just don't acknowledge you with the vape anymore. I don't know.
Definitely. And I feel like too, if you are a very like, guys, I'm done, I quit, and they're still like, hey, you need to hit this, that's not your friend.
No.
That is not a person you need to be hanging out with. That's not a person you need to be around. Like,
you're here, Victoria.
yeah,
Period.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that's
So-
when a lot of boundaries are set and
And I think definitely too, my first round going quitting, I cut off a lot of people because they're like, why? Like, that's your lifestyle. That's what you do. But like, then you're not my friend. You're not here to support me. I don't need you in my life.
I'll even interject one more time because Victoria's own words, she was known as Stoner
Stoner Victoria.
Stoner Victoria. We have
Yes.
numerous Victorias and she was known as Stoner Victoria. So to flip that script was not an easy thing for her to do. Excuse me, but the fact that she shares that, I think is very impactful.
Okay, so that, absolutely. I want to just say that we are now kind of over hour. And this could go on, I'm sure, for a whole long time, but we aren't able to do that. So if there are questions, Kyle has agreed to answer questions that we haven't gotten to. And we'll send those out.
Sure.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much, Kyle, Bria, Victoria, Blake. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much for sharing all of your insights with us.
Yes, thank you for
Of
having
course,
us.
thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
And particularly because you were here on your school break. You
On
did
fall break, yes.
okay. Take care. Thank you, everybody who joined.
Thank you. Oh, let's look at the chat.
We'll get those to you, Kyle.
Sure, there's somebody from Germany in here. That's pretty cool. We're going through the chat really quick. Yay.
If I end, it's gonna end for all, right?
We're
Yeah.
page 2.
Alyssa, do you have all the questions?
I do
Okay.
have most of them,
Okay,
yes.
all right, I'm gonna end for all. Thank you so much, everyone.
Cool.
Here.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.